Hey everybody, I have a Midinous tutorial for you today. We're going to learn how to make a 4-step sequencer and to use that sequencer to turn other sequences of notes on and off here in Midinous. And the reason why this is cool is because these other sequences that we're turning on and off can be polyrhythmic to each other. For example, this is a group of 6 and this is a group of 8. And they are not synced to each other, but because they're being turned on and off at regular intervals because of this sequencer, it sounds perfectly normal and great. And we've also got some drums for context, and we are in fact sequencing Ableton. Got a bunch of instruments here in Ableton. So let's get going. Let's start with the sequencer, which we're going to be heavily using in this patch. The sequencer is made up of 2 parts. We have a 2-bit binary counter. This is the output here. And then we have a 1 to 4 demultiplexer, which is one of the fanciest words I've ever heard. But let's start with the 2-bit counter here. It's made up of what is called T flip-flops, which Minecrafters know all about. Let's go ahead and build one together. Here, we're going to have a couple logic points to start with, and then that will be our output. And what I did to make this is literally cheat and look it up on the internet, because I am not an electrical engineer. I'm just a guy. So these will be our outputs. Let's go ahead and make these just LEDs. And that's going to be our top output, and that's going to be our bottom output. So we need something that's the T of our T flip-flop that's going to tell the flip-flop when to flip, which we're going to want to happen all the time. So what we want is an always on signal. And one way to do that is to have a buffer and set it to not. And then don't connect anything to the input. So the input will always be low because there's nothing connected there. Therefore, the output will always be high because it's a not buffer. We also need a clock ticking away, and we're just going to use regular note blocks, note points. Except we don't want to hear them, and we need one of them to start. But these are just going to go back and forth and tick against each other, and it needs to be connected to both the top and the bottom, or the bottom and the top inputs. We have 2 AND gates here. So these will output high if the T is high and the clock is high. So if we briefly take some LEDs, you can see that the LEDs pulse on when we get a click from our clock. But this isn't exactly what we want. We want to switch back and forth between the top and the bottom outputs. So what we're going to do is we're going to connect our top AND gate and our bottom AND gate, and these actually need to be NOR gates. So there you go, NOR gate. And then the NOR gates need to be connected to each other. And then they actually need to be connected back. And that is a T flip-flop. It's a little bit magical. I mean, if I think about it really hard, I think I get it. But again, I'm just a guy. I'm just a musician. But that's our T flip-flop. At our clock pulse, we're flipping from top and bottom outputs. And that's what we want. Because the 2-bit binary counter is 2 T flip-flops smashed together. This is the first one, and this is the second one. And basically what that means is that this one will always flip, but this one will only flip every other time the first one flips. And if we take an output from the first one and we take an output from the second one, that is our binary counter. And we're counting. So that's 1, 2, 3, and we'll go back to 0 right now. So moving on to our 1 to 4 demultiplexer. What that means, I guess, is that it takes one input, which is this, which is always high. We just want a high input, and divides it between 4 outputs. That sounds like a sequencer to me. So it's going to sequentially give a high output at each one of these outputs. This is a little bit tough for me to understand. I literally just looked up a schematic, which I'll put on screen, and copied it as best I could, and it happened to work. So that was lucky. But A 1 to 4 demultiplexer takes 2 bits of input. So that's why we needed a 2-bit counter. It's counting up here, and these 2 inputs are selecting one of 4 things. But let's get to making some music. We want to sequence some notes. That's what we're here to do. So let's put some notes on. What I want to show with this is that you can smash some polyrhythmic sequences together, but then sequence them at regular intervals to make them sound kind of normal. So let's get some polyrhythmic sequences going. We're going to have one of 6. That's going to be sort of our top line, I guess. Like our, not really a melody, but anyway. And then we're going to have one that is 4, I guess 8. So this is what it would do sort of naturally. These 2 things are different lengths, and so they're just going to loop independently against each other, kind of like 2 wheels of different sizes, and they only line up sometimes, like just there. And then we're going to make several of those and sequence them. Let me show you. I happen to know ahead of time the chords that I want, and so I'm going to copy and paste them and do a little bit of cheating. What I did was I sat down at my piano and found a couple collections of notes that I enjoyed, and I just put them in an order that I enjoyed. So they sound like this. That's one chord. It's basically like a C minor chord, and then this is the second chord if we mute the first one. And this is kind of like a weird F7, maybe it's a B7, who knows. And then this is a rootless B flat major sound. And we're going to sequence those. But we do have a problem, as you might already see. We have 3 things that we want to sequence, but we have 4 outputs. And Midinous has actually a quirk. I don't know if it's a quirk. I think it makes sense actually. But note points will only listen to the first logic point that was connected to them. So they'll listen to this one because I connected it first, but not this one because I connected it to it second. So you can see these are outputting a 1 basically, and these are outputting 0, but these are muted, as you can hear by nothing. So we actually need to basically sum these 2 outputs. So we're going to use an OR gate so that if either this one or that one are outputting a high signal, then this sequence will activate. So let's do that. Let's add a point and change it to an OR. And here we go. This goes there, and then this connects to all these. So that will eliminate the behavior that is not desirable. So that'll be on, and then it'll be off for these top ones, which we might as well start to wire. And I'm just going to wire them in the same fashion so that they look similar visually, although it's not necessary. I could just connect this right to every single point, but it does kind of look nice if everything looks similar. So there you go. We get 2 measures of this chord, 1 of this chord, and 1 of this chord. That works great. So let's go ahead and add bass to these guys. I'm just going to go ahead and draw a square and connect it to each other. This sequence is going to be 8 eighth notes basically, whereas this is 6. And have a start point, and all of these should be channel 2, I believe, and it should be low because it's bass. Not that low. 1 less low, please. There we go. And we'll connect it to the same buffer. Why not? Because it's doing the same thing. But then we're going to copy and paste. These notes are going to be a B, and these are going to be a B flat. So we actually have a problem, which is maybe tough to hear. The problem is that when we're switching from one chord to the next chord, we actually get the first note of the previous chord instead of the first note of the next chord. I wonder if you can hear that. So that was still a B flat on the first beat, and that was still a C, and this will be a B. So the sequence doesn't change until the next note. So this is a problem because we want our chords to change at the right time. And the solution that I have is, I guess, dumb, but it's basically to start the clock early. So if I could disconnect that and turn off this start point. So this will be our new start point, which starts the clock just barely before it actually is going to be changing, which means that it changes just right before the beat, and that is correct. There you go. We actually got a C at the right time, and a B at the right time, and we'll get a B flat at the right time. There it is. And now you can kind of hear that these top sequences are just kind of rolling. They're doing their thing, not really synced up to the bottom sequences. And because A, it's being changed at a regular interval, like every couple measures, and B, because this sequence is regular, it kind of makes the top sequence feel nice and cozy, even though it's a little bit strange. But that bass is just a little bit too boring for me, so I'm just going to mess it up a little bit. I'm just going to change it around. I'm just going to move some stuff around. I still want it to look like a square, though. Yeah, a little bit more movement, a little bit more exciting. But I think I want the first note of the sequence to be very probable, maybe 100%, we don't know. But then I want the other notes to be less probable. So we'll get hopefully a little bit of rhythmic variation. That's maybe too much. Nice. That's pretty good. I think we need to add some drums now. For the drums, I'm not going to sequence them with the sequencer. I think that I would just like them to be semi-regular, and maybe I'll add probability to them to get variation, but I don't feel at this exact moment like I'm going to want drums that are sequenced. I guess that would be cool to have like something different on the fourth bar or whatever, but if I remember correctly, this should be channel 3. And it should be a C. Yeah. Nice. And we do have some side chaining so that when the kick happens, we are side chaining the upper sequence there. But once again, I want a different rhythm. Nice. I think that's what I want. We always get the first kick of the bar, but sometimes it's a little different. That's kind of nice. Okay, now we should work on the snare, which I'm going to want to be similar. So I'm going to copy and paste. And I think that the snare is... I can't remember the note. The snare's a D. Don't want snare on beat 1. Okay, I think I want this note when it triggers to have another snare layer on top of it, but I only want it to happen sometimes, and so I need 2 notes to trigger at the same time, only sometimes. So I think that what we're going to do is this. We're going to add an output there so that but that's actually the wrong shape. So we need it to stay in time. So hold on. What we actually want to do is add a point that's sort of just a dead point that makes it so that the connections will stay in time with each other, that it will be the right shape. And then I want this to be a random portal. And then this will connect back. So sometimes we'll get a dead note and sometimes we'll get the triggered note. And if we make this 100%, yeah, that's what we want. But then we want another note on top of this at the same time. We can just, well, we can trigger that from here. So this is what we want. We want that to be over here, and we want these to be connected to each other. Let's use a little bit of logic. And when this note triggers, it will turn this logic on, which I want to turn on that note there. And then they should trigger at the same time. Oops, this needs to always send out 2 travelers. That should work. Yeah. And for my snare layer, I have this sample setup, which is another D, but it's an octave above. Yep. Yep. Nice. And then I want this kick to also be triggered by the same thing. I only want this kick when we get this offbeat snare. So we might as well make this 100% too, so it always happens. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so I was playing with the drums a little bit, and the new drum sampler plugin in Ableton is pretty cool. And if you set it to loop and sort of randomize the length and let the decay go long, it's kind of cool. And I think I want to automate that sometimes, which I have set up already, but I haven't done it in Midinous yet. I have a expression control, and I'm going to use the mod wheel to modulate the decay. So let's do that. Sometimes we want it to be looping. So we'll use a CC point and draw a grid. We want it to happen right when this snare hits. So these will be off, basically. And then this one will be on, basically. And that should, if this is the start point, which is the same point as the other drum loops, this should give us an automation that goes high here and then is off the rest of the time. We want channel 3, we want parameter 1. Yeah, that worked. Yep, so now we're getting a blip. A little glitchy, a little cool. That's kind of nice. Maybe a little bit less decay, maybe a little bit longer at bass. But that sounds pretty cool. Yeah, I like that. Okay, let's do some hi-hats. I'm going to draw a square. And have the start point be the same. Connect them all together. We're going to want this to be channel 3 again. And the note, oops, I missed one. What note is it? It is F sharp. So F sharp 1. F sharp. There we go. There's some hi-hats. Looks a little high in the mix. I think I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to have the on beats be one group that I can set probability for, and then I'm going to have the off beats be another group that looks like this, and then I can set probability individually for the on and off beats. Oops, I need a start point. And let's connect these together and set this as the start point. I know that I could make a circle that looks like this, or a square that looks like this, and that would work. But this is kind of neat because I can set probability for the on and off beats separately. So if I want the off beats to be less likely, I can do that. Or if I want the on beats to be less likely, I can also do that. So this is sounding pretty good. It's sounding pretty full, and adding more stuff I think would make it a little bit too busy, but I think it's all right. I think I could maybe do a little bit of color coding for fun, but I'll do that later. And what I really should do, I think, is pull out my saxophone and try to just play over it, and I'll record that and see what happens. Thanks so much for watching. My name is Lucas. I'm really glad to have had you around today. Go make some music.